The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We welcome to this week's show the former Republican Congressman Lou Barletta. Congressman Barletta was born and raised in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, and majored in elementary education at Bloomsburg University, where he graduated. After college, and a brief stint in Major League Baseball no less, Congressman Barletta returned to northeastern Pennsylvania, where he and his wife Mary Grace started a line painting business that would eventually become the sixth largest in the country. His career in public service began in 2000, when Mr. Barletta was elected mayor of the city of Hazleton. In 2004, he was appointed by President George W. Bush to serve on the United Nations Advisory Committee of Local Authorities as the lone representative of the United States. In November 2010, Mr. Barletta was elected to Congress for the first time by pulling off a stunning upset when he defeated the powerful and long-tenured Democratic Congressman Paul Kanjorski. He was reelected to the Congress 3 additional times. In 2018, Mr. Barletta won his first statewide election by winning the Republican nomination for U.S. Senator, although he ultimately lost in the general election to incumbent Senator Bob Casey. In 2020, Mr. Barletta chaired the Pennsylvanians for President Trump campaign in his reelection for president. Mr. Barletta was also chairman of the Pennsylvania delegation at the 2020 Republican National Convention. Last May, former Congressman Barletta announced his candidacy for governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He cited Governor Wolf's destruction of Pennsylvania's economy in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, the illegal actions Governor Wolf instituted before the 2020 general election, where he usurped illegally the power that's exclusively the province of the General Assembly. Mr. Barletta also cited the current governor's failed energy policy and considers the economic impact of Russia's invasion into the Ukraine as a portrait of why energy independence in America is so important. We will discuss all these issues on today's show.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Congressman, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Good to be here.
In fact, welcome back. You've been here a number of times. Let's start with a question I've asked other candidates. First question, I'm sure our viewers are kind of curious. How's the campaign going?
Campaign's going great. I'm enjoying crisscrossing Pennsylvania. I think running in 2018, Chuck, having that statewide name ID, as I travel in this race, people know who I am. They know my record, so it's made it a lot better, and I think that is part of the reason why the campaign's doing so well.
Well, I can confirm that. According to the headlines that I read, the neutral polling that's going on, there's virtually not a poll or a headline in Pennsylvania now that hasn't declared you the front runner. That in all the polling, you're sometimes it's close in terms of who's at the top, but you're always at the top of the list. And something made you decide to come back to public life, because after 2018, it appeared that you were going to go back to private sector, and
Yep.
and you weren't, having run that kind of campaign, you need to kind of unwind. And just like the great Tom Brady, who said, "I'm going," and now he's back, you decide to run for governor, knowing the difficulty of that road, knowing what's at stake for our Commonwealth and our country. So.
Yeah, no intentions to get back into public office and run for anything after the 2018 race. Finally had an opportunity after a long career in the private sector and in public office to enjoy my grandchildren. I have 10 grandkids and 4 daughters, and got to actually spend real time with them, quality time. And then the pandemic happened, and like so many people, we saw our world be turned upside down. And I watched Governor Wolf, how he mishandled this pandemic here in Pennsylvania. Being a former business owner, I know what it took for my wife and I, to build that business up, and all the sweat and tears and time, and how the employees of that business became part of your family. And watching Governor Wolf destroy people's lives by picking and choosing who could stay open and who could close. Some of these businesses never opened again. Their livelihoods were taken away. And I thought to myself, what gives one man this kind of power? The power to take something that you worked for your whole life and the employees counted on, and the logic drove me crazy. You could go to Walmart, and buy something, but you couldn't go to the local store. Then we watched him steal a year's education from our children when the science didn't back it up. That learning loss that year, we have to make up to these kids. We don't know the long-term effects of that. And then sticking masks on little children all day long, again, when the science didn't back it up. And then final straw for me was watching them put COVID-positive seniors back in a nursing home when we knew they were our most vulnerable folks. And 50% of our deaths here in Pennsylvania came because of that. And I just couldn't sit on the sidelines any longer. I thought, if not me, then who? I felt like I gave us the best chance, the Republican side, the best chance to beat Josh Shapiro, because during this whole time with Governor Wolf, Josh Shapiro stood by his side and allowed it to happen.
Rubber stamp.
And we need a firewall from what's happening in Washington to the people of Pennsylvania, and there will be none if Josh Shapiro becomes our next governor.
Right. Well, we'll have a continuation for probably 8 years, the way it usually works. Governors usually get reelected. Of course, Wolf is gone now. It's an open seat because he's termed out after 2 terms. But we could be looking at 8 more years continuation of the Wolf administration. Look, I've said to my audience that would be a catastrophe for Pennsylvania. As you're aware, and we're going to get into the self-induced energy crisis this country faces and Pennsylvania faces with what Wolf has done. But I know we want to talk about that. But from every standard of measurement, Lou, what he did, like how do Home Depot, Lowe's, and Target stay open, and all the little mom and pop stores that were much safer because they only have 10 or 12 people, they only have 6 workers, they're all shut down because we have to save lives. But if you pulled into a Lowe's parking lot or a Target during that shutdown, there were 600 cars. They had several hundred people in those places. The hypocrisy and the lie. And let me go a step further. The lawyer in me was gratified because on this show I have been saying for months and getting criticized, what he is doing is illegal and unconstitutional. Well, by September of that year, back to 2020, a federal district judge, Judge Stickman in the Western District, United States District Court judge, ruled what he did was unconstitutional and illegal. I felt gratified and affirmed in that because I've been telling my audience as a lawyer that it was. But what came out from that was that I think it was his deputy chief of staff, I want to say Robinson, I'm remembering the transcripts of that case, testifying under oath before the trial court, said that the governor wasn't at the meetings when these life and death decisions were being made. You know, he was safely tucked in safely, and kind of like President Biden when he ran his campaign from his basement. Right. He had staffers making these decisions. And I guess realizing his embarrassment when he was testifying, under oath, by the way, he said, oh, well, we communicated with the governor. They never kept minutes of the meetings. We don't even know who attended them. So talk about transparency. So you have a man that was making life and death decisions for people in this state, and there was no collaboration, and didn't even attend himself. So your thoughts?
Yeah, well, again, that like most people, I found myself screaming at the TV every night. And finally, my wife said, listen, either you shut the TV off or get off your rear end and do something. And I realized I have 14 great reasons to run for governor. My 4 daughters and 10 grandchildren. And, Chuck, we're at a point in our life, I like to say I'm in the 4th quarter now. When I get the ball, I shoot. I don't pass anymore.
I'm with you. Congress.
But it's not about us. It's about the next generation. What's happening, not only here in Pennsylvania, but we see what's happening in our country and the policies that are coming out of Washington that just go completely against with what I believe and the moral beliefs that I have. When you put this all together, realize that, we might not be able to change the country right now until there's another president. that takes this country in a different direction. But we could protect ourselves in Pennsylvania. I watched with Governor DeSantis, who I served with in Congress, some of the decisions he's made in Florida and how their economy is better off, how their people are happier, people are flocking to go there. And we can follow that. We don't have to reinvent the wheel on a lot of it. And God gave us, we're blessed with all this energy under our feet. I mean, how many other states in America would love to be Pennsylvania? But yet we have a governor and attorney general that literally wants to close the spigot and do away with what will be our future for our children and grandchildren.
Right. Well, I can tell you one verdict that's in, because I kind of stay very up on this stuff because I have a weekly talk show, so it's necessary. I read recently, now this is science, the country that did the least during the pandemic in terms of restrictions, masking mandates, vaccination mandates, total shutdowns, that country that did almost nothing in terms of keeping their status quo before the pandemic was Sweden. I don't know if you knew about that country. Well, the numbers are in now. Now, here are the numbers. In the United States, and I can't remember the exact number, but this is going to be within, close, somewhere between 2,600 and 2,700 Americans per million died during this pandemic over the last year and a half or so. And we did everything. We shut everything down, except for a few Republican governor states, like you mentioned, DeSantis, but overwhelmingly shut things down. Vaccination mandates coming from Joe Biden in the White House, masking mandates for our children, to your point, at school, not having them go to school. Well, Sweden did none of that. And they only had 1,700 per million people die in Sweden. Look, if you're doing somewhere in the vicinity of 1,000 people per million less died in Sweden than died in the United States of America, and we've effectively destroyed this country's economy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. And I had an opportunity to see it 8 years in Washington, behind the curtains, and people who work so hard and send their tax dollars to Washington, to see it wasted, to see every dollar you send, you're not getting a dollar back in return, and these are the people, our government, that are making life decisions on your private business, on your children, on your grandparents or parents in nursing homes, and it all went wrong. And I couldn't watch this anymore. Listen, it's pretty clear. I'm taking Pennsylvania in a totally different direction than what we're going in now. We'll have a strong leader who will trust that you know what's best for your children. And as far as our businesses go, listen, if I'm not comfortable going into your business, then I shouldn't go into it. But that doesn't mean I should shut your business down.
Of course. We'll be right back after this 3-minute message. The progressive left, 2 years ago, announced with much fanfare they wanted to transition us to a 100% carbon-free economy. Easier said than done. So, if that new Tesla or electric Mustang up the street has caught your eye, let's take a closer look at electric vehicle batteries, windmills, and solar panels. These three technologies share what are called environmentally destructive production costs, according to none other than the EPA. A typical electric battery weighs approximately 1,000 pounds. It contains 25 pounds of lithium, 60 pounds of nickel, 44 pounds of manganese, 30 pounds of cobalt, 200 pounds of copper, and 400 pounds of aluminum, steel, and plastic. The battery's interior holds over 6,000 lithium-ion cells. It should concern all of us that these toxic components are derived from mining. For just one electric battery, 500,000 pounds of the Earth's crust has to be dug up, according to Motor Trend magazine. About 70% of the world's cobalt, a significant component of the battery, comes from the Congo, a place where pollution controls are virtually non-existent, and the mines employ children who die from handling this toxic material. Should the dead kids be chalked up as part of the cost of driving an electric vehicle? And let us not forget that electric vehicle batteries do not make power. They store electricity generated elsewhere, primarily from coal-fired power generating plants or plants powered by uranium or natural gas. So it's a misconception that an electric vehicle is a zero-emission vehicle. Also now with solar panels, The problem is with the chemicals needed to process silicate into silicon. To make sure enough silicon requires processing it with 11 separate chemicals, including some that are toxic. Silicon dust is also hazardous to workers, and the panels cannot be recycled. Windmills, meanwhile, are the ultimate in embedded cost and environmental destruction. Each weighs 1,688 tons, containing 13 tons of concrete, 295 tons of steel, 48 tons of iron, 24 tons of fiberglass, and hard-to-extract elements, including dysprosium. The blades on the windmills weigh 81,000 pounds and have a life expectancy of only 15 to 20 years before they have to be replaced. In addition, the blades are not recyclable. But going green appears to be more destructive to the Earth's environment than meets the eye. Before we make the hyper jump to 100% carbon-free, we better have the foresight to closely scrutinize the long-term ramifications. Welcome back. Again, we're here today with former Congressman Lou Barletta, former mayor of the city of Hazleton, and wannabe at this point and leading contender for governor of our Commonwealth. Congressman, let's go back to an issue. You've made headlines all over the state just in the last week or so about what you want to do and where you want to take Pennsylvania on the issue of energy, which is something the state produces, did produce, right. Past tense, in abundance. And in fact, let me give you a quick stat. Second only to Texas in oil and natural gas capabilities under our Commonwealth. And yet, because everything's been shut down by the federal government, as well as our governor, who's just put us into RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, we're facing an energy catastrophe in Pennsylvania. So take it from there.
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is get us out of RGGI, should he follow through with that, and make a point of it that Josh Shapiro agrees with Wolf. And again, this would eliminate our energy jobs here in Pennsylvania and our future. It will be the opposite under a Barletta administration, where we're going to unleash the energy that we have. And there's a lot of things we have to do. They use DEP as a weapon to hurt businesses and chase these energy jobs away. And right now, DEP stands for Don't Expect Permits. We're going to change all that. We're going to put a deadline on permitting process so that they can't stall these projects. We've got to make sure that if they do, there'll be a way that businesses cannot have to just sit and wait. There'll be a third-party review that they could take if the permitting process is stalled. And we've got to get this gas to the market. I mean, there's no question. LNG, we've got to, we have an opportunity to take it from Western PA, get it to our port in Philadelphia, and export energy. And if you look at what's happening in the Ukraine, there is no question that this is a national security issue when these countries are dependent now on Russia for energy, when it was and should be the United States, and Pennsylvania should be at the head of that discussion.
Right. And our citizens, continuing in that line that you've already clearly stated, our citizens should have the benefit of that. It should not be in the form of almost a tax. Citizens, as I know they've talked to you about, are paying 300% more in terms of their energy costs this year. So we're hurting our own citizens at a time when inflation is at 40-year record highs. And to your point, I've said so on this show a number of times, our NATO allies, most of them are on bended knee to Vladimir Putin for oil and natural gas they should be getting from the United States.
Right.
So our defensive position and national security, to your point, Congressman, are absolutely compromised by our failed energy policy. I can't even talk about the disgrace of what's going on. They just heard a 3-minute view from me that this move toward winds and solar, every expert on this subject has said, we're looking at 30 to 50 years before we can get even to a point of a tipping point on renewable energy. We're going to need transitional fuels for the next 30 or 40 years. Why are we crippling our country and our states right now?
And they do it in the name of the climate. And instead of it being done here, where nobody can do it better than us, instead we're increasing Russia's pollution to the air in other countries. And there's our president going to Iran and Venezuela with an empty gas can, begging them for energy when we have it right here, and we're all paying the price. I mean, if you look at the costs go in the grocery store, we all see it. If you can find anything in the grocery store when you go, and that's because of the cost of fuel, because of the cost of energy. The only thing that's not delivered by a truck is a baby. So when that cost goes up, we all pay for it at the store. People in Pennsylvania are poor because of Joe Biden and the Democrats' policies on energy.
Talk about Pennsylvanians facing, I can understand your anger yelling at the TV, that Pennsylvanians face, because before Biden became president, we had our own governor in this state already talk about the several appetizers before the entree, before Biden got there, shutting this state down, putting us into Reggie. Yep. So shutting down businesses with bad decisions, and apparently didn't think enough of his own citizens to participate as governor in those meetings. So we can talk a lot about that. Let's turn another thing, a big issue that this whole country faces, and the failed progressive policies by the most left socialist Democrats around this country. We have seen it in San Francisco. No. I've made comments on this show. There's a great bestseller book out by Mac, I believe Schellenberger is the name of the author. And the title is San Francisco, How Progressives Ruin Cities. And then there's the example of Waukesha, Wisconsin, where I believe it was Darrell Brooks. Check this out. He had 2 serious felonies pending before he drove his SUV into that Thanksgiving parade, killing all those people, children included, elderly people. He wiped out all those people. And then we turn, finally, before your comments, into what the disgrace of Pennsylvania, what's going on in Philadelphia with Larry Krasner, again, a George Soros-funded, far-left socialist progressive, letting people out, not charging serious crimes, not pursuing convictions. And we have now record violence, record murders. You corrected me on something off camera when I said they broke the record last year for murders. Well, you said they're on pace to break that record again. So take it from me.
Yeah, and it's not only him. He's not in this alone, because we have a mayor in Philadelphia who declared Philadelphia a sanctuary city, is silent. There's crickets from Mayor Kinney. There's crickets from Shapiro about what's happening in Philadelphia. There's crickets from Wolfe, as Krasner is literally just opening up the jail cells. I don't know if you've been down to Kensington in Philadelphia, but I have not. I was there twice. Chuck, you've never seen anything like this in your life. It is the largest open-air drug market east of the Mississippi. There are needles, literally. You can't walk without stepping on needles. People are giving each other shots in the neck because their veins are collapsed. Ruined. The police have to sit in their cruiser. I walked there and watched it, where drug deals were being made right in front of the police, and they're not allowed to do anything. They've destroyed a beautiful city where we can't even go there and feel safe again. And that's all coming to an end again. I'm going to stand with our law enforcement, the men and women who protect us each day. They demonize them. Right. For years now, they've demonized them while we watched our cities burn down, and they wonder why crime is out of control. Well, there'll be a new sheriff in town that has a different view. We're going to stand with law and order and give them not only the funds and tools that they need, but the respect that they deserve.
Our governor was standing with protesters, and pictures were sent to our website and our Facebook on the Volpe Report, along with letters from decorated and retired state troopers, as well as current ones, saying, look at what our governor has done to us. Standing right next to Wolfe, by the way, most of whom had not had masks, and this is in 2020, when everything was supposed to be masked. He was arm in arm, and right next to him was some person with a blue shirt, and on the shirt was Blue Lives Kill.
Yeah.
So that's the message our governor sent.
Marched with the Black Lives Matter group that were holding up signs, Blue Lives Murder. Yeah, and I mean, so what message is that? And we wonder why there are record crimes and murders in Philadelphia. People want to live in safe neighborhoods. And we've got to go in there and make sure kids are getting a good education. Let them know that we respect our law enforcement. And there's a penalty when you do break that law. And, that's what people want again. They want to feel safe.
Yeah. Well, getting to, I'm trying to go through a number of the issues. we have, by the way, this year a record increase in Wolf's proposed budget, somewhere in the vicinity of $5 billion in new spending. Obviously, he's saying that, oh, no new taxes. Well, here's the reality of it. That, yeah, maybe there's no, although you can argue that some of what he has put in is a tax, but it's hidden well.
Right.
But you even with the assuming, as we say as lawyers, assuming arguendo that's correct. Here's the reality. The reason he's trying to get that and push that amount of spending increase is because we're getting this one-time COVID relief money that a lot of states that didn't even need it, by the way. You want to talk about why we have inflation?
Right.
That's why. But at any rate, so it's a one-time thing, and I remember this, and I've said so on the show. I remember vividly when Tom Corbett, Republican governor in 2010, was elected. He took over from two-term Democrat Ed Rendell. Well, because of the collapse of our economy and the Great Recession of 2007, 2008, we had all this money that was given to Pennsylvania. And they stuck it into education and said, look at all the money we're spending in education. It was a one-time expenditure. So the next year when Republican Governor Tom Corbett takes over, he had a $1 billion deficit, and then they blamed him for it.
Right.
So a lot of what is in that budget now is made up of, look, smoke and mirrors. It has no chance of passing. So how do you think you can make Pencil fiscally responsible again after 8 years of what this government?
Well, I did it in Washington. I was a chairman of a subcommittee called Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management. So FEMA came under my jurisdiction, EDA came under my jurisdiction, but every federal building in the country came under my jurisdiction. So the first federal building I went in, what I found was for every federal employee that worked there, they had 1,800 square feet of space per employee, literally a house. And
That's a nice house.
I put my business hat back on, and I thought, what does this lease cost us? And instead of negotiating, I began looking at the leases. Instead of negotiating a long-term deal where you can get a better deal for the taxpayer, they were just renewing every year. So we issued a policy that when your lease expires, you're moving out 100 to 180 square feet of space per employee or less. Going to negotiate up to a 10-year lease, get a better deal for the taxpayer. And in 4 years before I left Congress, in just the agencies whose leases expired and had to move, we saved the taxpayer $4.4 billion. Nobody lost their job. No programs were cut. This was just simply waste of taxpayer money. And so what I bring to the table is a business background of somebody who's actually signed the front of a check, a mayor who's actually had to pass a balanced budget, and we're going to go in there and we're going to go for the low-hanging fruit, and that's the waste that we all know and see. And that's your money, and that's your audience's money, and that's where we begin.
Right. Well stated. Well, Congressman, thank you so much for your time, and we wish you well on the trail. Again, we were here today with former mayor of Hazleton and congressman representing a big chunk of northeastern Pennsylvania in his time in Congress, Lou Barletta, who is now flat out the front runner for governor of Pennsylvania for the Republican GOP nomination on May 17th. And you've heard some of his ideas. You now understand what motivates him. And as you know where I stand in politics, it's what's in the heart that matters most. What motivates you, what leads you to want to lead this state. And I can tell you that he has the right stuff and the reasons for running for this office. He doesn't need, as I'm at a point in my life like him. As I mentioned, I just spoke to my granddaughter, Guinevere's 4th grade class. And you know, you look in their faces and you can sense a little bit of the fear and all the things going on that they don't quite get yet, but that they don't control. Yeah. So we need leadership in this state, and clearly you have a great argument that you should be the one to provide it. We'll be back next Sunday with another guest talking about the issues we face here in Pennsylvania and that we face in the United States of America. God bless.